Right now, over a billion people are staring at a screen, watching a video they didn't choose. They didn't search for it. They didn't ask for it. A machine decided they should see it, and it was right. They watch, they scroll, they watch another and another. 40 minutes pass. They didn't notice. This is TikTok, and the machine making those decisions is the most powerful behavior shaping technology ever built. More powerful than television, more powerful than search engines, more powerful than any propaganda system any government has ever constructed. And it is owned by a Chinese company, operates under Chinese law, and sits at the center of the most consequential information war of the 21st century. But here's the twist, and this is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. The scariest thing about TikTok's algorithm isn't that it might be controlled by Beijing, it's that even if it isn't, the damage is the same. Welcome to Context Missing. Today we go inside the machine. Let's start with how the algorithm actually works, because most people have no idea, and that ignorance is part of the problem. Every other major social platform, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, built their recommendation systems around your social graph, who you follow, who follows you. TikTok threw that model away entirely. It doesn't care who you follow, it barely cares who you are. TikTok's algorithm, formerly called the recommendation system, internally known as the interest graph model, watches what you do, not what you say you like, what you actually do. Did you watch that video to the end? Did you rewatch the first 3 seconds? Did you pause on a frame? Did you share it or just let it scroll past? Every micro behavior is a data point, and the algorithm processes thousands of data points per user per session, building a model of your psychology that is, in many ways, more accurate than your own self knowledge. It knows you're interested in conspiracy theories before you've consciously admitted it to yourself. It knows your relationship is troubled before you've told your friends. It knows you're anxious, lonely, politically angry, or sexually curious, and it feeds those states because feeding emotional states keeps you on the platform. This is not speculation. This is documented in internal TikTok research, leaked to the Wall Street Journal and other outlets, that the company conducted on itself. Let's talk about why TikTok's algorithm is so much more powerful than anything that came before it. The key is the feedback loop speed. YouTube or Facebook might update their model of you over days or weeks of behavior. TikTok updates its model of you within the first 15 minutes of a new session, sometimes faster. That speed matters enormously. It means the algorithm reaches a highly accurate psychological model of a new user faster than any previous system. There's a famous internal TikTok document, reported on by multiple outlets, that described the system as achieving a compelling feed within a few videos. A few videos, not a few days, not a few weeks, a few videos. That's how fast it locks you in. And once it locks you in, it doesn't just show you what you already like, it gradually pulls you toward more extreme, more emotionally intense versions of that content. This is called rabbit holing. The algorithm has learned that emotional intensity keeps people watching longer, so it escalates, gently, incrementally, almost imperceptibly. A user who shows mild interest in diet content gets pulled toward more extreme diet content. Mild political content becomes more extreme political content. Mild anxiety content feeds deeper anxiety content. Not because anyone programmed it to do this deliberately, because escalation works, the algorithm found it, and it uses it on a billion people every day. Now let's zoom out to the geopolitical dimension, because this is where TikTok stops being just a tech story and becomes something much more serious. TikTok is owned by ByteDance, a Beijing headquartered technology company founded in 2012. Under Chinese law, specifically the 2017 National Intelligence Law, Chinese companies are legally required to cooperate with Chinese intelligence services when asked. Article 7 of that law states, any organization or citizen shall support, assist, and cooperate with state intelligence work. ByteDance is a Chinese organization. TikTok is ByteDance's product. The law is clear. The implication is obvious. Now, ByteDance has consistently denied that it shares TikTok user data with the Chinese government, consistently, emphatically, under oath before the U.S. Congress. And here's the problem. We have no reliable way to verify that denial. Because TikTok's data infrastructure is opaque, its Chinese engineering teams have had access to U.S. user data, and the Chinese government doesn't announce its intelligence requests. In 2022, ByteDance employees in China were confirmed to have accessed the data of U.S. journalists, including their location data, to try to identify who was leaking information to the press. ByteDance admitted this, fired the employees involved, called it an isolated incident, but the incident revealed something important. The wall between TikTok's U.S. operations and its Chinese parent was not as solid as advertised. The data question: does Beijing have access to the behavioral profiles of a billion TikTok users, remains genuinely unresolved, and that ambiguity is itself a national security problem. But here's what I said at the beginning, and I meant it. The data question, serious as it is, might not even be the most important issue. Because there's a second, deeper question. Does the algorithm itself, regardless of who controls it, shape what a billion people believe? And the answer to that question is, unambiguously, documented, yes. Let's start with a comparison that should alarm anyone who cares about democracy. TikTok shows different content to users in China versus users everywhere else. The Chinese version of TikTok, called Douyin, is heavily filtered. It promotes content about science, history, education, and patriotism. It limits content to 40-minute sessions for minors. The international version, TikTok, has no such limits. It promotes whatever drives engagement: outrage, anxiety, tribal conflict, conspiracy theories, and endless entertainment. ByteDance built a different product for Chinese children than for children everywhere else, one that protects attention spans and promotes educational content, one that doesn't. That asymmetry is not an accident, it is a choice, and the choice tells you something about what ByteDance and possibly Beijing understands about what the algorithm actually does to minds. You don't build a protective version for your own children while exporting the addictive version to everyone else's children by accident. Let's talk about the documented effects on political belief, because this is where the algorithm becomes genuinely threatening to democratic systems. Multiple independent studies have documented that TikTok's algorithm creates faster and more extreme political polarization than any previous social media platform. A 2023 study by the Center for Countering Digital Hate created new TikTok accounts and followed where the algorithm led within minutes of showing mild interest in political content. Within 30 minutes, accounts showing interest in conservative content were being served white nationalist videos. Accounts showing interest in progressive content were being served extreme anti-police content. 30 minutes from a new account to extremist content without any explicit search or deliberate choice by the user. The algorithm didn't ask these users whether they wanted to be radicalized, it just found the most engaging content, which happened to be the most extreme content, and served it. And here's the critical mechanism. Once you've been served extreme content and engaged with it, even briefly, even to disagree, the algorithm interprets that engagement as interest and serves you more. Outrage is engagement. Fear is engagement. Tribal fury is engagement. The algorithm doesn't distinguish between positive and negative reactions. It just measures attention and maximizes it. Now let's talk about something even more disturbing. What happens when this tool is used deliberately, not just accidentally? In 2023 and 2024, U.S. intelligence officials and multiple independent researchers documented coordinated influence operations using TikTok to shape political narratives. Chinese state media accounts, some openly labeled, many not, operate on TikTok and produce content that consistently promotes narratives favorable to Beijing. Content critical of U.S. foreign policy, content amplifying American racial tensions, content promoting skepticism of U.S. institutions and elections. Now, here's the important nuance. Some of this content is simply true. The U.S. does have racial tensions. U.S. foreign policy does have legitimate critics. Skepticism of institutions can be healthy. The manipulation isn't necessarily in the content itself. It's in the amplification. It's in which true stories get boosted, to which audiences, at which moments. Showing American black communities content about police brutality while simultaneously showing white conservative communities content about urban crime is not neutral curation. It's a targeted strategy to deepen the exact divisions that make America hardest to govern, and an algorithm optimized for engagement will do this automatically, whether or not anyone tells it to. Let's zoom in on three specific case studies where the algorithm's effects became impossible to ignore. Case Study 1. The 2024 U.S. election. TikTok was the dominant news source for Americans under 30, more than television, more than newspapers, more than any other digital platform. The content young Americans saw about the election, the candidates, the issues, was curated by an algorithm we don't fully understand, owned by a company subject to Chinese law. We don't know, and cannot know, whether that curation was neutral, but we know it was powerful, and we know the outcome of elections increasingly turns on young voters. Case Study 2. The Israel-Gaza Conflict. TikTok became the dominant platform for information about the conflict globally within weeks of October 7, 2023. Studies showed TikTok content about Gaza was overwhelmingly one-sided, not because of deliberate censorship, but because emotionally intense pro-Palestinian content generated more engagement and was therefore algorithmically amplified. Jewish communities documented systematic suppression of pro-Israel hashtags. Pro-Palestinian creators documented the opposite. Both sides felt the algorithm was against them. What both sides were actually experiencing was the same thing: an algorithm that amplifies whatever generates the most emotional response. And in a conflict, that means content that inflames, not informs. Case Study 3. Mental Health. In 2021, Frances Haugen, a Facebook whistleblower, revealed internal research showing Facebook knew its algorithm harmed teenage girls' mental health. TikTok's own internal research, later leaked, showed similar findings. Prolonged TikTok use was correlated with increased anxiety, depression, and body image issues, particularly in girls aged 13 to 17. The company knew. It published internal documents acknowledging the harm, and it continued optimizing for engagement anyway, because engagement means revenue, and revenue trumps well-being. Let's stop and ask the question that makes this genuinely difficult. Is TikTok uniquely dangerous, or is it just the latest version of a problem we already had? Because Facebook amplified misinformation during the 2016 election, YouTube's algorithm radicalized people toward extremist content for years. Twitter X amplifies outrage by design. The algorithm problem is not a TikTok problem. It's a social media problem, and TikTok is simply the most advanced, most efficient, and most globally scaled version of it. If TikTok disappeared tomorrow and a billion users migrated to Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts, the same algorithmic logic would follow them. The architecture of engagement maximization doesn't change when the logo does. So the question, should we ban TikTok, might be the wrong question. The right question might be, should any private company, Chinese, American, or otherwise, have the power to shape the information diet of a billion people? Because Facebook is American, and Facebook was used to organize a genocide in Myanmar, and Facebook helped spread the misinformation that fueled the January 6th Capitol attack. The flag on the building doesn't make the algorithm safe. The architecture of the algorithm is the problem, and that architecture is everywhere. But, and this is important, TikTok is still different. Let me explain precisely why. First, scale and speed. TikTok reached a billion users faster than any platform in history. Its recommendation engine is measurably more effective at capturing and holding attention than any competitor. Second, the ownership structure creates a conflict of interest that doesn't exist with American platforms. Meta answers to American regulators and American courts. ByteDance ultimately answers to Beijing. Third, the Douyin TikTok asymmetry. The fact that ByteDance built a healthier version for Chinese users and a more addictive version for everyone else is not a minor detail. It is a statement of intent. Fourth, the access question. Even if we set aside content manipulation, the behavioral data of a billion users is an extraordinary intelligence asset. Knowing what a billion people fear, desire, believe, and how they can be influenced, that information has military and strategic value. Fifth, there is no reciprocity. American social media platforms are banned in China. TikTok operates freely in every Western democracy. That asymmetry is not neutral, it is a strategic advantage. These five factors don't prove that TikTok is a Chinese weapon, but they mean the risk calculus for TikTok is genuinely different from the risk calculus for Instagram, and pretending otherwise is naive. Let's talk about what governments have actually done and how inadequate it has been. The United States passed a law in 2024 requiring ByteDance to divest TikTok or face a ban. TikTok challenged it in court. The Supreme Court unanimously upheld the law in January 2025. Then, in one of the most remarkable reversals in recent political history, Donald Trump, back in the White House, granted TikTok a 75-day extension. Then another. The company that was about to be banned became a guest at Trump's inauguration. Its CEO sat in the front row. The threat evaporated. Why? Because TikTok has 170 million American users. Many of them are young, many of them vote, and banning a platform that young people use to communicate, create, and consume is politically toxic. The politicians who understand TikTok as a strategic problem are the same politicians who are terrified of the electoral consequences of banning it. That tension has paralyzed Western policy for years. Meanwhile, the EU fined TikTok €345 in 2023 for violations of children's data privacy rules. TikTok paid the fine, changed some policies, kept operating. The algorithm kept running. Fines of hundreds of millions of euros to a company generating billions in revenue are not deterrents. They are the cost of doing business, and TikTok has calculated that it's worth paying. Now let's talk about Project Texas, because this is TikTok's answer to the national security concern, and it deserves serious scrutiny. Project Texas is TikTok's $1.5 billion initiative to store all U.S. user data on servers inside the United States, operated by Oracle, an American company. The theory: if U.S. data is on U.S. servers controlled by a U.S. company, Chinese engineers can't access it. The national security concern goes away. The problem: data storage location doesn't determine data access if the engineers building and maintaining the algorithm are in Beijing. The recommendation engine, the part that decides what a billion people see, is built and updated by ByteDance engineers in China. Data sovereignty doesn't change who controls the curation. It's like saying you've secured your house by putting an American lock on the door, while the person who built the house still has a copy of the key and visits regularly to make adjustments. Project Texas addressed the question people were asking. It didn't address the question that actually matters, and sophisticated observers on both sides of the debate know this. Let's talk about something that almost never gets discussed in the TikTok debate: what the algorithm is doing to our collective ability to think. Democracy requires citizens who can hold complex, contradictory information in their heads, who can tolerate ambiguity, who can update their beliefs when presented with evidence. The algorithm is systematically training a billion people to do the opposite. Short-form video optimized for emotional engagement rewards certainty, not nuance; outrage, not analysis; tribal identity, not independent thinking. The average TikTok video is 15 to 60 seconds. That is not enough time to explain a complex policy question. It's enough time to trigger an emotional response to one side of it. A generation raised on TikTok as their primary news source is a generation trained to feel strongly about issues they don't deeply understand. That is a democracy-corroding phenomenon. And again, this isn't unique to TikTok. Cable news did this with 90-second segments. Twitter did it with 280 characters. TikTok does it at billion-user scale with a feedback loop measured in seconds. We are running a civilization-scale experiment in what happens when you replace considered information with optimized emotional stimulation, and we won't know the full results for another decade. Here's the part of this story that nobody wants to say, because it implicates everyone. TikTok's algorithm works because we let it, because we pick up our phones when we're bored, lonely, anxious, or avoidant, and we give it exactly the data it needs to hook us. The algorithm is not magic, it's math applied to human psychology. And human psychology, it turns out, is remarkably consistent and remarkably exploitable. We are wired for novelty, for social validation, for emotional stimulation, for tribal belonging. The algorithm didn't create these needs, it just found the most efficient way to exploit them. And we, individually and collectively, have not built the psychological defenses to resist a technology that has been specifically optimized with billions of dollars of engineering to defeat those defenses. Media literacy education, the standard policy response, is bringing a textbook to a gunfight. You cannot out-educate an algorithm that updates its tactics in real time based on what's working. The asymmetry between the sophistication of the technology and the sophistication of the human response to it is one of the defining crises of our time, and it is almost entirely invisible to the people experiencing it. Let's talk about what a serious response actually looks like, because ban TikTok is both politically impossible and strategically insufficient. First, algorithmic transparency. Require platforms to publish how their recommendation systems work, not the proprietary code, the logic. What signals does it optimize for? What content does it suppress? Right now, the algorithm that shapes the beliefs of a billion people is a trade secret. That is an extraordinary amount of power to operate with zero public accountability. Second, algorithmic choice. Give users the ability to opt out of recommendation systems entirely, to see content chronologically or from accounts they explicitly chose, rather than what the machine selects. The EU's Digital Services Act requires this for large platforms. It's a start. Most users won't use it, but the option matters, both practically and symbolically. Third, data minimization. Limit what behavioral data platforms can collect and retain. An algorithm that can't build a detailed psychological profile of you is an algorithm with less power to manipulate you. Fourth, platform liability. Hold platforms legally responsible for documented harms caused by their recommendation systems, the way we hold car manufacturers responsible for foreseeable safety failures. This would create the right incentives instantly. If TikTok faces billion-dollar liability for algorithmically amplified content that contributes to teen suicide rates, the algorithm changes overnight. None of these are easy. All of them face powerful lobbying opposition from the platforms themselves, but they address the actual problem rather than the politically convenient problem of TikTok's Chinese ownership. Let's zoom out to the biggest question this whole story raises, and it's a question about power. Who should have the ability to shape what billions of people think, feel, and believe? What information they encounter? What emotional states they inhabit for hours every day? Right now, that power belongs to algorithms built by private companies, accountable primarily to their shareholders, optimized primarily for engagement, and answerable to no democratic process whatsoever. Not governments, not elected officials, not public institutions with transparency requirements and accountability mechanisms, private companies running on proprietary systems in the dark. That is an extraordinary concentration of epistemic power, the power over what people know and believe, in the hands of entities that have no democratic mandate to hold it. And we handed it to them, voluntarily, in exchange for free entertainment, without reading the terms of service. The Chinese government's potential influence over TikTok is alarming, but the American government's tolerance of Facebook's influence over elections, its own elections, for a decade should be equally alarming. The problem is not the nationality of the algorithm. The problem is that any algorithm with this much power over human cognition should not exist without democratic oversight. Here's where we come back to the question I raised at the beginning. Is TikTok a Chinese weapon? Maybe, possibly. The evidence is suggestive but not conclusive. The Chinese government has the legal authority to make it one. Whether it has exercised that authority, we genuinely don't know. Is TikTok's algorithm reshaping how billions of people think, feel, and perceive political reality? Yes, documented, unambiguously by TikTok's own internal research. Is that reshaping making democratic societies more functional, more informed, more capable of self-governance? No. Also documented, also unambiguous. So we have a technology that is demonstrably harmful to democratic cognition, regardless of whether Beijing is pulling any levers at all. And we have a political and regulatory system that has been completely unable to respond to it because the technology is too popular, the companies are too powerful, and the politicians are too dependent on the platforms for their own communication. The algorithm that decides what billions of people think is running, right now, without meaningful oversight, without democratic accountability, and without any serious constraint on what it optimizes for. And most of the people it's shaping have no idea it's happening, including possibly you. So I'm going to leave you with a question, not an answer, a question. The next time you pick up your phone and open TikTok, or Instagram Reels, or YouTube Shorts, and a video appears that makes you feel something strongly, ask yourself, did I find this, or did something find me? And whose interest does it serve that I feel this way right now? The algorithm knows you better than you think. The question is whether you know it well enough to notice what it's doing.